Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the first inaugural public forum on the Corvallis Pavement Rehabilitation Program. My name is Steve Starcevich. I'm leader of the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition's Transportation Action Team. We are very happy to be hosting this public forum that's going to be presented by Public Works. Today's public forum will be about the Northeast Circle Boulevard Reconstruction and Resurfacing project. So our presenters from Corvallis Public Works will be Josh Bjornstedt, Josh Capps, and Aaron Manley. And our Q&A moderator will be Nick Meltzer from Campo. And we'll introduce him later at the end. This is a Zoom webinar, and you'll have two options, the Q&A or in the chat. We would really like you to use the Q&A icon that you see at the bottom of your screen. Nick Meltzer will be scanning the Q&A, organizing the questions, and then at the end, presenting them to Public Works staff. So this forum is being recorded, so those that can't make it to this to it live will be able to watch the recording and submit comments after watching it. So the comment due date is March 24th at 5 p.m. and you can send your comments as late as that date and time to Josh Bjornstedt and Josh Capps. Their email addresses are here. So without any more introduction, I'd like to bring on Josh Bjornstedt to present on Northeast Circle.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, share my screen. Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen there? Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction. So I'm a project manager here in engineering at City of Corvallis. I've been here 21 years in different capacities. Currently, I'm a project manager that oversees our capital projects. I've been involved with the street resurfacing and reconstruction projects the last, probably 8 years or so on our various projects around town. So Circle is our next one in the queue for this year. So, generally speaking, engineering has taken these types of projects to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board when it was, before it was disbanded back in 2019 or so, and provide, the opportunity for public to comment on what we're bringing forward, or maybe more so to see what we're bringing forward for construction for that summer. So that's kind of what we're hoping to establish with TAT here, and kind of start that relationship again for our projects that are coming up. So first, I'd like to open with kind of just a recognition of, we received quite a few questions prior to this forum. A lot of interest and excitement about the bicycle and pedestrian amenities that go into building a low stress network, which Circle is part of. And it's exciting to see that interest. And there's works, Public Works has a process we're just starting to put in place where there may be more opportunity for outreach, and Aaron Manning will speak more to that later at the end of this forum. So let's see. So today, this will be a presentation on a maintenance project that's in our CIP, our capital improvement plan, and it is the maintenance of Circle Boulevard. And in this case, it's a reconstruction and a resurfacing project. So looking at the project scope for these types of projects, typically when we're looking at rehabilitation, what's going on here? We are looking at establishing a new driving surface. In most cases, it's an asphalt surface, and it's typically the area located between the curbs and the gutters. We don't often extend the scope of these projects outside of those boundaries. It's strictly to get that street back into a shape where traffic can travel it without, bumps and potholes and that sort of thing. So with that, we're looking at typically replacing the traffic signal detection loops. And then it's an opportunity to, of course, it's new pavement. So we're looking at remarking the street, putting pavement markings down to establish our bike lanes, vehicle lanes, turn lanes, and that sort of thing. With our resurfacing or reconstruction, we're also required to bring ADA sidewalk ramps up to accessibility standards. So many of our ADA ramps in town don't meet those standards. And we look at this opportunity to design those so they do meet that by the end of it. And then when we're looking at these projects, we typically consult with the transportation system plan. And in this case, we see that this segment of Circle is part of a future neighborhood bikeway connection. And then, as I mentioned, it's a part of the citywide low stress network, which we'll get into more in a little bit. With any maintenance project like this, where we have the opportunity to add elements of those low stress, what would make a low stress network, we certainly try to get those into the project. What we'll see here today is nowhere near what a final low stress network would look like. But we're getting, it's pieces at a time. It's what we can do with the scope and the budget we have for the project in front of us. Let's see. So this project, a couple details on this project I don't have on my slide here. Our estimated construction is $4.2 million for this project, and with a total project of around $5.8 million. I believe that's in the revised CIP. Is a rebudget involved with that takes us to that $5.8 million as of July 1st. This project is funded mostly by the transportation maintenance fee, which is that fee you see on your utility bills. There is also an STPG grant and that stands for a Surface Transportation Block Grant that Campo distributes. And that makes up about $1.2 million of that total project cost for this project. So for this project, we're looking at a project timeline where we started our design before the holidays in December. We are currently advertising for construction bids. We do plan to open bids on April 4th. And then we should have a contractor under contract by first part of May. Typically, construction sequence on a project like this is you will see they'll be working on the sidewalk ADA ramps first. And then we've got a couple of bike ramps that we're going to be adding. All of those improvements happen before we get to actually resurfacing or reconstructing the street. Let's see, there's also an outreach going out to the local businesses and residents that should be going out this week. And then finally, we will post project information on the city website. One thing I do with my projects is I will provide weekly construction updates. It's mostly intended for the businesses and the residents directly impacted, but we will post that as well on the city website. It gives a look ahead to what's coming for that upcoming week. We can't foresee too far in advance of impacts to the public, but usually a week ahead, we know that, we're going to be working on such and such side of the street, or we may have certain ADA ramps out of service. So we try to identify those to give public a heads up on what's coming. So what does our project look like? So we have two parts to the project. We have the reconstruction, which will happen from the railroad tracks to railroad tracks. That'll be a full reconstruction and removal of the concrete that's there. The lovely concrete we've had there for a number of years will be going away. I've had Some of the auto body shops in town have told me they use that section of circle to drive their vehicles down to find out where the bumps and the sounds are coming from. So sorry, folks, but you'll have to find a different street for that when we're done. But this essentially is from the city right of way here at the railroad tracks eastward. And the reconstruction piece, again, happens between the railroad tracks. The second piece of this is the resurfacing piece. That's what you see around town when we're grinding the surface and replacing it with asphalt. That happens from the tracks, and we'll take that all the way to the city limits at the HP East entrance there. Let's see. So back on the reconstruction piece, there will be, I guess, expectations or what you should anticipate during construction. Circle will remain open to traffic, although we will be at times reducing lanes of travel. We'll be merging lanes of travel and shifting traffic around just to give ourselves the workspace we need to excavate that street. We actually will be excavating down about 32 inches. It'll provide us then a section to build back an 24-inch rock base and an 8-inch asphalt section. Most of this work will happen during the daytime. There is a section on Circle where we're digging that out. Let's see, there's an entrance here just east of the tracks. It's a commercial entrance. From that point eastward to Bellevue, up to Bellevue, that'll be night work. And then also the 4 acres intersection. The thought there is it's just too disruptive to the businesses that access to the north, and then the businesses accessing 4 acre. We figured night work to get that dug out and then brought back to a grade where cars could drive on it the next day would be better for those businesses and the residents in the area. The Capri Villa courtyard here with the residents there will also was a reason to limit the ingress egress during construction. If we can do that at night, it certainly is a way to limit that impact there. Okay, so that was the boundaries of our project. So and the kind of the scope of that work. So what I'm going to go into next here is where we can, we're going to put some of these bike and ped amenities or incorporate those into our work. It is limited in nature, but where we have the opportunity to do it, we will try to do that. And so just kind of starting here on the left, we'll work our way to the right. Overall, with the street we've got here in Walnuts, we're going to add buffered bike lanes to the surface. It is, buffered bike lanes, they're not a protective element to low stress network, but it does provide some separation and buffering for those bike users. That'll run from the length of the project from the tracks. Then I've got another slide that shows it heading all the way to the city limits. On the west end, we had some requests for getting bicyclists from the multi-use path that runs up 99. For those who don't want to enter that at the corner there at the ADA ramp, getting those folks from the sidewalk back onto the on-street bike lanes just after the tracks. So there was a request or two on that. And we've got the ability to do that. I'll show you more of that later in another slide. So that's an element we're going to add there. Going eastward, we are realigning the ADA ramps at 4 acres. Right now, they're a pretty good skew. Again, I've got another slide that'll show that. But that'll be a change there. And then at Bellevue, the northwest corner, we're going to put a curb extension. It's a curb extension, not necessarily for slowing vehicles down or making any crossing shorter on Circle itself. It's actually extension into Bellevue. with that curbside sidewalk we have in that location, it was really challenging to make that ADA ramp to accessible standards. So the bulb out in this case is providing us a little extra real estate to design and build that ADA ramp to a standard. So that you'll see there. And then here at Jack London, there had been a request for adding a pedestrian refuge to help with pedestrians crossing the multi-lane street, similar to what we've had here on 9th Street, where it's a protected median, essentially a refuge for users to cross to and continue crossing as vehicles stop. So this being a part of also a neighborhood bikeway, at least labeled as such in the TSP, this kind of sets that up for future. I wouldn't say there's a plan yet for what that neighborhood bikeway looks like, but with the requests we did get for something here, and then having that come in the future, perhaps it made sense to put that on this eastern leg of this intersection between the northeast and what would be the southeast crossings. And then at that location as well, we'll have another bike ramp that would take on-street bike users off of the street if they preferred, and into a position where they could utilize that pedestrian refuge as well. So let's see, I think that's about covers the amenities in the reconstruction area. Like I mentioned, in the resurfacing section, really the only amenity we're adding here is the continuation of the buffer bike lanes to the city limits. There had been some requests on, does Walnut and Circle, does that make sense for a roundabout? Well, maybe, but that's a larger discussion. If we're talking low stress networks and maybe what that brings to that, it's another time, it's a discussion for another forum and another more in-depth discussion at that point. So like I say, we did receive a lot of comment and a lot of interest in treatments through this section. These that I've just gone through are kind of what we felt like we could fit into the scope of what this maintenance project is. So if we look at the section on this, we've got, this is Circle Boulevard, and the bottom widths, the bottom dimensions I have on here are the existing lane widths. We have about 66 feet to utilize between face of curb and face of curb. And existing, we had about a 4 foot 9 inch bike lane, 11-foot travel lanes or plus, 11.25, 12 foot in the median. And we felt like there was an opportunity to narrow up those vehicular lanes, take that additional 4 feet we gained and add the 2 buffered bike lanes onto the on-street bike lanes. So end up with 6.75, I guess 6 foot 9 inches will be the total width of the bike lane. And it's just kind of making the most of what we have with the distance we've got across the street there. The other change you would see on the section is at our right turn lanes. We've got 3 of them, 1 at 4 Acre, and then the 2 at the HP entrances. We will maintain an 11-foot turn lane, a little extra width there for a turning vehicle. And then where we've got the conflicts with the vehicles and the bikes, we will stripe that. We will establish that bike lane green zones, as you've seen in many places. We've got them here in town as well. So I'm going to go through these next few slides. I've been at webinars where you could spend 2 or 3 days talking about each of these. This is just a very general introduction to what these are. Again, just for those who may not know what those amenities are that I've discussed, this is kind of just to provide some very basic information on that. So our buffered bike lanes, essentially an extension of that on-street bike lane. Typically in town here, we've been establishing these with just street markings, and to the left of the bike lane, we try to get the standard is that 8-foot bike lane, if we can get that, if we have the width to do that. This picture here is actually a picture off of Technology Loop, where we did have the width to get 8 feet. So here we've got the wide gutter pan, similar to what we have on Circle, and then we were able to go the total 8 feet, 2-foot buffer and 6-foot bike lane. So as I showed on that section, we're going to end up with a 4-foot 9-inch bike lane, which is the gutter pan. And then our first stripe will start right at that asphalt and concrete seam, and then establish a 2-foot buffer. So it'll be a little different you're seeing in this picture. I just wanted to point that piece out. Essentially, it's providing that buffer between vehicular traffic and the bicyclists. Vehicles aren't allowed to travel in that space. The 8-inch white line designates that. And then for cyclists to receive that full benefit, you'd typically stay to the right of the buffer. And it is not a pedestrian way, so pedestrians would not be using that space. Curb extensions. Typically, this is a safety feature for pedestrians. Usually accomplishes a couple of things. This is a picture here at 11th and Van Buren, where we had the existing parking here. We were able to extend the crosswalk in this curb extension, so it makes a shorter crossing length for the pedestrian. Gets the pedestrian out there in the eyes of the vehicle users, also the cyclists. It's as far as navigating, it's a standard crosswalk. Vehicles and bikes, so let's just be aware when you're turning that it may feel like the pedestrians out there a little more, even though they're still within the confines of that ADA ramp. The bike ramps, this is kind of a new thing. We're gonna give this a try here on Circle. Like I mentioned, it's essentially a transition from a sidewalk to an on-street bike lane, or from the bike lane to a sidewalk. And typically we're talking multi-use paths when we're talking sidewalk in these instances. We don't have that multi-use path up and down the length of Circle. But what we do have, like I mentioned on that west end, where we do have cyclists coming off of that multi-use path that runs along the highway, if they are just taking that right and crossing the tracks, this would be a way for them to transition from that sidewalk down onto the on-street bike lanes. And then at the refuge itself, this will take, again, cyclists off of the on-street bike lane and then allow them to position themselves in a safe location to look left, right, and then cross when vehicles stop for them. Essentially just trying to provide that smooth transition from the two modal facilities. Really no change for motorists in navigating these bicycles. Just a reminder that you're merging either from a sidewalk onto an on-street bike lane or vice versa. So you're going to want to yield to cyclists already in the lane or pedestrians on the sidewalks. And then these are not for pedestrian use. They're not ADA ramps. They do not follow any slope, or they do not have truncated domes that we would see on an accessible ADA ramp. So that is something to note. As far as slopes go with our designs, the western bike ramp is going to have a slope of about 10% on it, and it's directional. So there will be wings to that ramp. The eastern ramp is much flatter because we are bringing a cyclist into the ADA landing that we're building there. So we're at about a 3% slope, maybe maybe just a little over 2.5 at that location. The pedestrian refuge, essentially, I mentioned before, this is just a concrete island with a pass-through. Our pass-through for this project is going to be about 10 foot wide for a 10-foot wide opening. It's good. The idea there is if there are bicyclists using this with pedestrians, we've got enough width that they can pass by each other in there. There will be signs placed for vehicles to stop at stop bars on the project. There will also be some electrical conduits and junction boxes installed for future lighting needs at that refuge by Jack London there. So planning ahead a little bit and for future improvements at that location. Essentially navigating these, it's a crosswalk. Vehicles need to stop. In this case, it's not a mid-block crossing. It is essentially an enhanced crosswalk at Jack London and Circle. With it being a T intersection, we have a legal crossing there. This will just enhance the safety of that crossing for pedestrians and bicyclists. Going back to that Circle and 4-acre, I mentioned the realignment of the intersection there. You can see the old striping here where it's pretty skewed. We pulled the ADA crossing to the west, probably 15-20 feet. It helped with our ADA design here, but it also shortens that crossing distance and just makes it more typical of an intersection. We didn't want to go a full 90 crossing to the street. We felt like that was starting to pull this crossing quite a ways away from the intersection. And then similarly on this east side, we pull this one just a little bit to the east. Again, it helps with our ADA design there. There are some pretty big challenges with making these ramps meet ADA and not impacting this entire business as far as their access or their asphalt parking lot. And then with these relocations, we'll have new pedestrian push buttons that get installed so they're close to those crosswalks. And that's kind of that's the project. There's our contact information. I guess this will be made available to everyone. Yeah, I think that's it. We're excited to get this one going. I think Circle's been on a lot of people's minds as far as how that surface rides for vehicles and for bicyclists. And I'll just end again with, we recognize there's more work to be done with respect to the low stress network. But I think those conversations can start, but they'll need to end up at a point where maybe it's a forum itself, where it's almost like a workshop where we're getting information from folks and then being able to build that into actual CIP projects for those. So anyway, that's it. I'll turn it over back to Steve.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Questions are rolling in, and Nick Meltzer, who's the transportation manager at Campo, has kindly agreed to take time out of his very busy schedule to help us today. So thank you very much, Nick. Nick's been monitoring the question and answer icon and function, and lots of great questions. So I will let Nick take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for all these great questions, everyone. I'm going to jump to one that I saw, which is maybe kind of a good one to start with. Josh, a question was, given the timeline with bids due shortly, is there any significant modification possible at this time? What's the right level of input for people to provide to the city?
Yeah, I think where we have a chance to take input is with what I showed as the amenities that we're proposing. If there's something that doesn't look quite right in those bike ramps, or if there's something that with that ped refuge, if there's tweaks we can make to those items, we have the ability to do that still. And so I guess that's if we could keep comments and questions to those, that's something we can certainly take care of. The bigger questions, which are beyond this, what this construction project is, that's probably something we'll need to set up for on future projects. We really want that to be a part of that process. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're at with this one. We're out to bid. Like I say, we've got an opportunity to change and tweak some things to that, the amenities we're showing, but beyond that, we're kind of stuck to the scope we've got.
Okay, well, let's get into some of those suggestions then. So one of the first ones was a question about, it's great to see the buffered bike lanes, but are there any chances of plastic flex posts to be added for some more physical separation along that corridor?
Are we talking about like the flex posts we see at some of our ADA corners, I believe, here in town? That possibly. I don't know if that's the right application for a long run of bike lane here on a street like Circle. Could possibly be a nightmare for maintenance. But that's something we could take a look at. It'd probably come down to the maintenance piece of it and how likely those are to stay in that location. I don't know. I might ask Josh Capps on this one. Is there any concern with those in that application, Josh, as far as those delineators that are being discussed?
Yeah. No, I mean, maintenance is a challenge, but looking at if we're thinking about it from a standpoint of looking at the TSP and what guidance we have there, it does state that our city standards do include buffered bike lanes, and in special cases, protected bike lanes might be implemented, but that is based on recommendations for the city engineer. So really, I hate to now bring in somebody else in, but maybe Aaron, if you have anything to say about that as well.
Oh, no problem. Sure. So I think the initial answer from my perspective would be when we're implementing any kind of change, the TSP, which is still fairly new, implements buffered bike lanes as the example, which we haven't had in Corvallis before. What we want is a standard and to be as consistent as we can be with that standard. Accepting the width, we won't always be able to get the 8-foot buffered bike lane, but what we will try to be consistent with is the buffer itself and just the physical appearance, the visual look of that facility. And so if we're implementing a standard, our goal, of course, is that consistency. So bicyclists, drivers know what to expect throughout town. They're not going to question, okay, what do I do here? Because of a unique situation or a unique installation. So on this issue, we have not implemented longitudinal protected bike lanes with those flexible delineators. And so my thinking on that would be, we would not want to do that on a single case basis. If we did want to consider that, it probably, that to me sounds like a study and a choice to either make that our standard for a protected bike lane or not, and evaluate that option, and with a significant amount of community input. So I think it's absolutely a valid question, but I would be hesitant to take an individual project and implement something like that without having the backup or background behind it to say, yes, this is the direction we want to go.
Great. So yeah, there's a few more questions related to that topic about adding flex posts or added a protected bike lane or a raised bike lane. And what I'm hearing from the city is that for this project, kind of what you're seeing with buffers is most likely, but that the city needs to maybe have a larger conversation about where protected or the addition of flex posts makes sense.
Nick, I'll jump
Yeah.
on that again. That's an option too. If we can allow that study to happen, and we can always come back and put these delineators in that are being suggested. So again, the project being construction and reconstruction of the street, we can get that done. And then if that interest is there and there's community support for it, we can look at the alternatives.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, that's a good point. Related to kind of enhanced elements, is there consideration of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at that pedestrian crossing that you mentioned with the refuge?
Not at this time, there isn't. We try to put those mostly at mid-block crossings to alert drivers to, hey, this is not your typical intersection. We've got a ped crossing here. Again, like I said, this is an intersection. This is a legal crossing. We're enhancing it with this refuge. It doesn't mean a RFB couldn't go here. It's just that the standard has been, those have pretty much been mostly at all of our mid-block crossings. I'm trying to think if we have one that isn't a mid-block crossing. But anyway, that's something that could be added if there was interest for that and there was a need for that. But at this point, there is not one planned for this location.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it's more traditional where the crossing is in the middle of a block as opposed to where two streets intersect, which is this scenario.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Moving on, there was a question about the railroad crossings. Is there a plan to address those, or they're in bad shape?
Yeah, they are in bad shape. We will be resurfacing up to those. The crossings themselves, we've reached out to railroad. We're unsuccessful in coordinating a project where they would come in and redo those crossings. At the least, we'll take care of the potholes and the raised asphalt in those locations. So it should be smoother in that respect. A couple of years back, we did coordinate with railroad on like the Walnut resurfacing. They came in for a couple of days, rebuilt their crossing, and then we paved up to that. We just, for whatever reason, were not able to connect on that to the point where it became part of this project. So they'll be smoother, but they will not be a new rail crossing.
Okay. So there's been a few questions. Maybe you could kind of take these together. There's questions about, what's the design speed limit for this project. There's some concerns about, you're putting in a smooth new surface of pavement that may encourage people to go faster. And then the second part of that question is, how does that relate to lane width? There was a couple of questions about, the narrower lanes for vehicles versus the lane width for bicyclists and buffered bike lanes, and kind of how you made all those kind of design decisions.
Yeah, so we're not changing any speed limits out there. I think we've got 45 that starts east of the tracks there at Concert, and then spacing, I think it's 35 in the section between the tracks. We didn't change any of that design. The narrow lanes themselves is a bit of a traffic calming in some sense. The standard for arterials is 11 feet. We're actually going to 10.5. We actually have streets that are 10 feet for arterials, but again, there were limitations in those situations where that's all we could get. So I think, in general, you're going to see, I know it's a new surface and it looks, it can look like a location where you can go fast. That becomes more police at that point as far as monitoring that and patrolling that. But I'm hoping that with the 10.5 foot, it's going to feel like a bit of a squeeze, and maybe those speeds won't be as high as if we had left it at the 11 and 11.25 that it was existing.
And then, I think you kind of covered the lane width in that kind of response as well.
Yeah.
So let's see. There's quite a few suggestions for future improvements to say, how's the opportunity for future, neighborhood low stress bikeway improvements that connect through here, or if there should be an additional crossing here or there. What's the right kind of response for this kind of collection of, potential or future improvements?
Well, I think a lot of those low stress improvements can and are able to come in after a street has been resurfaced or reconstructed. When that happens, I think it's a larger discussion. It's a point where Public Works and Transportation will start that engagement process of looking at what elements do we want in this section for this low streets network of Circle. And I think the community at large should have the opportunity to comment on that. How do we want to shape one of our city streets? So that's kind of the goal and the hope there is these ideas come forward and they're vetted through a public process. I don't know, it's these TAT forums perhaps, or it's their workshops. I don't know, maybe Josh, if you had an idea on what those might look like. I know we've chatted behind the scenes a little bit on getting that going with maybe the next project coming up, but I want to make a point that with what we're resurfacing with this project, there's still opportunity. We're not missing a chance to build those amenities into what would be a low stress network on Circle.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point, Josh. And I can't speak to the crossing that some have suggested in the chat, but the straight answer is that we really haven't begun planning Circle Boulevard when it comes to a low stress network. Neighborhood bikeways are the central component for that network, and we have a plan for those. And we're currently working on 11th Street now. We have Tyler Ave next, Southeast Corvallis, 27th Street. So we're focusing on neighborhood bikeways to begin building that true network, and Circle Boulevard is on that list, but it's not in the immediate plan. So Circle will be showcased, but we have to be thoughtful about what we put in and how we do it and why, just like we do with every neighborhood bikeway that we build out there. But Josh is right. I mean, this isn't something that once it's touched here, it's a done deal. It's not the way it looks like for the low stress side of things from my perspective.
Yeah, and so there's a few more comments, about, additional improvements and kind of what I'm hearing from the city. This is really a curb to curb project, and try not to expand the scope too much. And so there's limited options for kind of more significant improvements.
I would add to that, what is real helpful with public comment is if you can present the reason. I mean, suggestions are great, but really what is the problem you see? Be clear in specifying the need. And then we can, engineering we have the ability to engineer a solution to what we're seeing as a collective need or a collective concern out there. So it's important when those questions come in. Suggestions are great, but it's really those, it's defining the problem or the need that you're seeing out there as users. That's what we can respond to best in our engineering.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. Steve gave me a strict 12:50 deadline, and I believe he's going to download all the questions we don't get to. Correct, Steve?
That is correct.
Okay. So if your questions don't get answered, be on the lookout for this recording, as well as kind of those questions and some additional answers. I think we'll maybe we'll talk a little bit about kind of access management. So I'm hearing there's a new Chick-fil-A development coming along Circle, and there's some bus stop improvements associated with that. There's also some concerns about additional traffic, access points, things like that. Could you talk to that, Josh?
Yeah, I can talk to a little bit. So that's correct. The Chick-fil-A, the old McGrath site is in for redevelopment. It's another division here in the city that's reviewing that, but my understanding is it's the opportunity to look at access points along that frontage. Right now it's a very gray area. It's a wide section where pedestrians and cyclists both kind of come to this location, and it's like, oh, you know, how do you continue crossing as if you're a pedestrian? You're almost walking down that wide area. So again, with this development, the redevelopment, it's an opportunity to look at perhaps pulling, closing up that access point, extending what would be more of a traditional sidewalk across that frontage, and just cleaning up that area in general. I'm really speaking out of term as far as, you know, what that review process would look like. It's another group here in the city that does it, but that's kind of my understanding of an opportunity there that the city has to work with the developer on.
Okay, well, so I think I did see one invitation out there in the comments. So Wendy Byrne is inviting folks to ride a long circle when the project is done. She would enjoy hosting such a bike ride to use the new amenities. So I think we'll close on that comment. Thanks to Wendy for the invitation. And I'll hand it back to you, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Great job. It's very hard because there were so many great questions. It seems, I think Nick covered a lot of the big ones, a lot of the clusters, but there are also some fine tuning questions that were also really good. So like Nick said, I have been downloading all of these questions. I'm going to organize them and send them in to Josh, and they can go through those and answer the ones that haven't been answered, and see them all in their you know, the context of all of them together. So so I think Aaron wanted to say something about future public forums regarding the repavement program.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So first, we recognize, you know, Circle is right at the kind of the heels of construction. We're just about ready to go with this one, and recognize, you know, right now is just not the best time to bring this project forward and to get all your comments, and we completely understand that. We're, you know, as was kind of mentioned in the beginning, we had a forum with BPAB. We lost that forum in COVID, et cetera. And we're really trying to reestablish what our outreach can and should be. And so this has been our first opportunity. So we really appreciate that opportunity. But again, it's late. It really is late to get in front of everybody. So the CIP is essentially, we do one of these projects every year, pretty much. And next year's project, we're just starting development on it. And so we'd like to come back to this group with that project. I'd like to do it early summer if possible. So we would actually be ahead of really our design process. And we'd be able to present something that, let's say, would have more open canvas to field all of the comments and hear the concerns and try and incorporate some solutions to address those comments and concerns. And I will also echo what Josh said about kind of that difference between a comment and a concern. It is really helpful for us when we're considering what is the appropriate design solution to have the concern. See, what is the issue, the challenge, what is the problem that's occurring as a user that you can articulate to us, and then we will better be able to find that engineering solution for that problem. So very, very helpful to have that type of feedback. Understand there are a lot of balancing that has to be done when we're looking at, okay, what does the final design look like? We have all types of users, and we have all types of limitations on a given stretch of roadway, how wide it is, how many driveways, what the users are. This particular section of Circle, it's got a lot of freight vehicles. We have some large businesses, and we have some small ones, and then we have some residential areas. So all of those factors play in, and so when we are taking in that feedback and trying to address concerns, we of course have to account for all of the different issues that exist in any one stretch of road. So just want to say, I guess wrapping up, that we recognize this is coming to you late and apologize for that. It is our sort of our first time back in front of a public forum. We want to have this opportunity and be able to do it at a time that makes a little bit more sense to be able to incorporate all that feedback. So again, the next project, I'd like to get it in front of this group in early summer. That would be, I think, my goal. And so I think probably Josh Capps will be able to give a heads up to this group when we think we'll be able to do that. But I guess if we're invited back, I should say. So I'll stop there, but thank you,
Aaron,
for allowing us to present.
Yeah, thank you so much to Public Works for presenting this plan and just opening this channel of communication. This is very helpful, and just you can see the community interest too in the number of questions and how many great questions there are. So thank you very much to you guys. Appreciate it. And thank you very much to Nick Meltzer. I wanted to just remind everyone that, again, the questions and comments that you've entered into the Q&A, entered into the Q&A will be forwarded to Public Works. The recording of this forum should be available in a day or two, and it will be up on the Coalition website. I will be reaching out via email to all the active transportation Google lists. I think the city is going to also share a link to neighborhood associations and others that might be interested to this recording. And we can all even watch the recording again if we want and submit more comments if we'd like. The comment due date, the closing date is March 24th. So it's a week from this Friday at 5 p.m. And you can send your comments to Josh Bjornstedt and Josh Capps. And I think that wraps it all up. Thank you all so much for coming. And we'll see you next time. Take care.